Find out who's going to be sent home, knocked out of the tournament. It is Deplete from Beyond versus Self-Reliance.
All right, so we see 6 hunters coming in here in King's Rest. Not a surprise. We've seen this comp being run by all the teams so far in the EU region. It has been a time trial map as well. So we see both teams actually dealing with those minions of Sul. They do get rid of them first, and then they make sure they shut them out off the aggro from these guardians to make sure they don't have to deal with them because they're pretty highly bolstered.
That's right, and I think we see the Guardians from Deplete from Beyond will pop up a little bit later whenever they're going through the gauntlet. So right now they're moving through and they're getting ready to grab everything in the room. You see Clicks, I believe, who took care of some of those minions early on, avoid the bolsters onto the rest of the group, and now we get to see them get started right now as both teams high-risk pulls, very high trash density coming in this one.
Yeah, we see both of the teams holding on to their bloodlust, presumably for the first boss, because it is a tyrannical environment. But yeah, bolstering can cause so many issues on these specific pulls because there's all kinds of different HP pools on these mobs. You see the champions, they have the most HP, and you have the witch doctors who have a lot less, but the witch doctors are the most important mobs because they constantly cast this deathly chill. Furo going down, unfortunately, for Self-Reliance, and he does release, so we'll see if Haruta can actually kite this trash out before Furo is back.
That's right, we've seen a couple of times with the healers going down. They also had to deal with some of those minions of Zul, just popping them and tons of bolster stacks going up onto these mobs. They're running rampant as we speak. They gotta get a couple of them down. They're very low in terms of health percentage, but they still have thousands and thousands of health. We're not even able to see the nameplates right now because they're so large.
Oh no. Yeah,
there's more minions of Zul!
Yeah,
there's more. There's full health casters coming in on this one. Self-Reliance is going to have to just reset at least part of this pull. They might be able to get the golem down. Yeah, okay. The golem does go down. Harudra with it, but they might just be able to kill this really bolstered caster. Please don't. Okay, Furo going down. Feign Death's coming up. A little bit of cleave there as well from the Quaking, and they're just going to have a full wipe on this one. Self-Reliance, very disappointing first start into the King's Rests. So rough.
Yeah, it looked like... okay, so Furo going down, of course, caused this chain reaction of the wipe because Harudra tried to kite, but the minions were there and he broke this SC. I believe there was a binding shot down from the hunter, and Harudra had to jump in to kite, and it broke, and then getting rid of the minions bolsters all the mobs, and it's just a chain reaction. But the problem is they finished off the pull, except the newly pulled mobs, and they could have de-aggroed them by Shadow Melting, but because Furo somehow got in combat, and he was the one not having Shadow Melt ready, he got all the other people in combat as well, and then they needed to have a full team wipe, Furo going down again. So very unfortunate chain of events, while on the other side, you play from Beyond. Zero deaths on their end. They had a very clean room, and the Golden Serpent already on 35%.
That's right, Deplete from Beyond is going to be looking to extend that lead, and it's always really cool to look at how Deplete from Beyond has changed, you know, one week to the next. We kind of talked about Dr. J and Mr. Hyde with his team last year, Nagura, but it really seems like this has been a very quick turnaround, a quick about face for Deplete from Beyond, as they're really moving through this tournament and moving through this first dungeon extremely well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, last cup when they participated, we saw them struggle a little bit in some of the dungeons, making some mistakes here and there. And we talked about it might have been something to do with their synergy because Dr. J just joining the team, maybe there were some disagreements between who's shot calling, who's saying what, because if you have two different kind of voices, shot callers in your group, then it can definitely cause some problems. But it looks like they have no more of these issues this time around, as they have a really clean performance so far up in this lower final here against Self-Reliance. We see Igloo here. He's going to pull those last two Guardians still from the entrance, and he's going to pull it on top of the gauntlet where the rest of his team is waiting for him.
That's right. It's just a more efficient way to make use of your time. I love that quick transcend to get back into the ring quickly. Because this gauntlet is just going to take a pretty decent chunk of time, they might as well combine it with something else to make it a bit more efficient. So I'm curious to see if they're going to get the kill on all of these mobs first, and if they'll have time because the golems are slow, they're lumbering, they still cast their different abilities. Try to get them killed very quickly, before the golems show up. There's the Ring of Peace to further make sure that the golems are out of range. Then they can bring them in as the next pack gets going. So I love that play there. Very, very good timing as well, just to show how much they've kind of set this up for exact precision. So everything's clumped together, everything's ready to go the second the next wave spawns.
Yeah, this timing is crucial. So this is why this the Guardian pull on top of the boss and on top of this gauntlet is actually pretty dangerous because of Bolstering, right? Because you can't actually stop the trash mobs here in this gauntlet from spawning. Once you finish off one trash group, the next one will spawn immediately after, or there will be a couple of seconds, but it will spawn and you can't stop it from spawning. So you need the Guardians to be pulled exactly in the right moment between two of the trash pack spawning, else you will bolster one of them or you will have them be there too late or too early. And this is why all of the teams have this perfect timing coming in, also with the Ring of Peace helping out a little bit, of course. So well done by Deplete from Beyond. Self-Reliance now also managed to catch up. They did finish off the first boss, are fighting the first trash pack here. Seems like Furo is away, he's getting the Guardians for them as well.
Yeah, we're just seeing, mirror pulls, and we've seen this a lot of times as well, Naguro, where teams have just said, this is how the dungeons pull. This is how we're going to do Workshop. This is how we're going to do King's Rest. And even Underrot as well, a couple times today, we've seen just almost mirror strategies, and it comes down to, all right, who makes a mistake first? Who blinks first?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Self-Reliance do this dungeon earlier today, and unfortunately, they had this double wipe on Machimba, because they actually have a very difficult strategy coming in on that boss. They were pulling the Guardian at the bridge construct on top, and then on top of having the bridge construct, they were also having one of these skeletons that come out of the tombs if you click them without any person being inside. And it was just too much damage to handle for Herudra, and he went down twice in a row, unfortunately for them. I hope this time around they can pull this off, as Deplete from Beyond is done with this gauntlet. We see the Lightfoot potions being popped by everybody, and now they're gonna skip this mob here with their full Shadow Meld team that they have. And of course the Hunters can just feign death.
Yep, they're grabbing the golem. We've seen a lot of teams grab this golem on the middle of the bridge and start bringing it along into the rest of the pack, because it actually gives a surprising amount of percentage. I think it was 8-2 or 8-3 where they ended up buffing a couple of the different mobs in King's Rest, giving them substantially more percentage because everybody was just skipping them. So it's actually really worth to grab that middle golem on the bridge. And right now they just need to make sure they're taking their time, grabbing up all of the fluids, any of the incubation fluids, as well as the imprisonment golem as well. So the instrument golem right here. And right now it's just trying to make sure that they're not over bolstering, as there's still tons of HP on these mobs.
Yeah, so they are indeed pulling that construct on top, interestingly enough. As you mentioned, we've seen some teams do this before as well, but it's still just an interesting thing to see because of bolstering, right? It seems like pulling a construct with so much more HP compared to the fluids, on top of the fluids, not a very good strat to do on bolstering, but because they have to deal with the constructs anyway that are in this room, who have very similar HP to the bridge one, it just seems to be worth it for them. They still have to do two pulls here, right side and left side separately, but yeah, it works out for them. It seems very clean so far. Self-Reliance actually dealing with that Awaken mob. So far we saw Deplete from Beyond skipping all of the obelisks, while Self-Reliance actually choosing to do the Fear one.
It really looks like we have some ridiculously heavy bolsters on the construct, but they do bring it down as well, and that single target out of the Hunters is absolutely critical for a lot of these pulls. But Chimbo the Embalmer gets a set up here as Deplete from Beyond continues to further the lead. Self-Reliance just taking down the Obelisk mob we've seen thus far, and this is a time trial dungeon. We've seen these teams play it quite a lot lately, and that's one of the most interesting things I think about some of these lower semis, these lower bracket games as well, Nagura, is it's kind of just like an endurance test. They know these dungeons, there shouldn't be any shocks or big surprises. It just becomes how well can your team buckle down, especially when you're facing elimination.
Yeah, and they have to play so many games back to back to back if they would come out of this loser bracket into the grand final, right? There's just so many games after another, and it's just so much pressure, and the amount of focus you require to play an MDI dungeon like that every single second counts. You can't if you make one mistake, it can cause a group wipe. That's why you need full focus for the whole duration of the dungeon. And if you have to play multiple series in a row, it can definitely be very exhausting. So kudos to those teams to be able to focus for that long, as the Deplete from Beyond is fighting Machimba here. We see them also not cast any abilities here in Machimba because they got the person out of the tomb immediately as soon as they got entombed.
Yeah, you see they're actually tossing a trap on one of the mummies, and it's so important to break out whoever gets imprisoned immediately, to the point where it's not that big of a deal if you let one of the mummies out of the coffin, right? As long as you're having crowd controls at your disposal. I'm kind of curious to see Deplete from Beyond if they've gotten any other mummies on the opposite side. You see they're moving into position by the gate, and even though Machimba's not doing any other abilities, his auto attacks can absolutely truck the tank, so kudos to the healer, to the tank as well, for just being able to sit in there and make sure that the positioning is as optimal as they possibly can. You know, right as the boss goes down, they're at the gate, they're ready to go. Full boss ahead of their opponents, and a little bit of trash percentage on top of it as well.
Yeah, it looks like Self-Reliance this time around not dealing with that construct anymore. Never mind, they are pulling it. So we saw the beam come from the bridge on Self-Reliance side. So they are doing the same strategy again, pulling that construct on top of Machimba. And this is so dangerous just because this construct really doesn't like moving. And this beam has a very long range and it goes through walls and line of sight. So even though you're really far away from it, you're still gonna get hit by the beam. So that's a lot of healing for Furor to do. On top of that, Harudra is taking so much damage from the boss itself. So they want to make sure they pull this off properly because they've already struggled with this one the last time around.
They did indeed, and right now we're seeing Deplete from Beyond with just a very large pull, and again, watching on the bolsters that they have going out right now. It's so nice to have the flexibility, mobility of all of these hunters, as they're not having to worry too much about some of those hunting groups coming out. Surprised we're not seeing some more binding shots as well to help deal with it, but I guess they're not that worried about dropping them low, because right here we've got the Hulk that we have to be taking down as well, so it just becomes, you know, a new target as Atari gets bumped up into the air, but instantly charges back down. And look at the HP on the Hulk right now. This guy is getting absolutely destroyed.
Yeah, they have so much damage. These hunters just have so much single target focus damage. This is why we see these full hunter comps specifically in a bolstering environment. And on top of that, King's Stress is just very single target heavy. You don't have these huge trash pulls like you see maybe in a freehold or something like that. But specifically bolstering makes hunters incredibly good just because they can really focus down targets and they can focus all of their damage on the high HP ones. Some other classes, they just do AoE and they can't necessarily focus their damage onto one target, but hunters are very, very good at that. Clicks unfortunately going down, but they can just use an out of combat rest. Thankfully that Quaking did not interrupt the cast.
And that Quaking really brought half their team quite low onto that one. And it's one of those little things, but Quaking with 8-3, the cleaves become even more deadly if you have more than 2 people hitting each other. So, you know, you hate to see that little bit of extra time lost in the process, but right now we're seeing Deplete from Beyond. Looks like they're grabbing some of the Berserkers to start bringing them into the mix as well. So, kind of interested to see how they're going to be handling this. I guess they're going to try to get some quick kills in on the Berserkers before the next boss transitions.
Yeah, that's what they do, yeah.
And just get a bit of extra cleave. I thought they'd need 3 targets in order to get optimal cleave damage for the Hunters. I don't know. I didn't know that 1 would help out at all, though.
I don't think 1 helps out at all for their single target damage. I think they just do it for efficiency to get the extra little bit of trash percentage that they need. And maybe 2 Berserkers is just too much to handle to do at the same time, just because of the bleed that it applies. Now, you do have the pets who can take the bleeds off, so that would still be a possibility. But yeah, Click's unfortunately getting the Severing Axe, used his turtle a little bit too late. You can avoid that cast if you turtle in the right moment. Click's using it slightly too late. Either way, Igloo did manage to heal the debuff. And now to finish off the Berserker, meaning Sanazal did not get bolstered because it was just not attackable yet.
Yeah, look at that timing as well. They had it dive right before Sanazal ended up spawning, so great to be able to see that. I'd imagine that they're just going to leave the Berserker CC'd and bring it into the final one with Akka Ali, so that they can just more easily switch targets to any of the totems and take those down rapidly. Self-Reliance trying to get themselves back into the game right now, as they are still a couple pulls behind with Deplete from Beyond halfway through the 3rd boss. continuing to build upon their lead and looking just very strong out the gate here in our lower semis matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Self-Reliance did recover now. They did manage to finish off Machimba, and they are on their way to the third boss as well. But for going down, unfortunately, on one of their skips, this is actually a huge problem because they do not have a rest. They don't have an out-of-combat rest. The only thing they have is a battle rest, or an engineering rest, but you have to be right next to the character. Yeah, they both released because there's no way of the hunters to get them back up.
Oh, well, it's disastrous right now on the side of Self-Reliance. Just one thing compounding onto another as Deplete from Beyond, starting Aka Ali, going to be grabbing that Berserker pretty soon, I'd imagine, as well. And Self-Reliance's hunters, they just have to sit on their hands and wait. They're getting so far behind. I mean, at least they're going to have the pterodactyls to bring them just to the bridge, I'd imagine. Yeah, so they can get just to the bridge.
They'll just have to do a Shadow Meld skip again.
Yeah,
right.
They're going to have to just run through. I guess they will end up having their speed potions back. They will have Shadow Meld back, which is so much more time wasted. You just have to sit there, watch them walk. And King's Rest, not a forgiving dungeon when it comes to checkpoints.
Definitely not. Either way, unfortunate for Self-Reliance. Deplete from Beyond, though, on the other hand, they don't have any of those mistakes. Of course, we saw one death by them so far, but it wasn't as huge of a deal. It was at the very end of this skip, and they could just rest him back up immediately after the skip was over. So Deplete from Beyond just looking very clean. They see Akali going down. They didn't actually deal with this Berserker. It still succeeded in the corner. Looks like they maybe just do not need the percentage from it. So therefore they can just Shadow Meld off the aggro when they do the skip here to Shadow of Soul. Looks like they only need Shadow of Soul plus all of the Awakened mobs that they skipped. They have to do all 4 of them with the last boss.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, I remember seeing Self-Reliance doing some, but I didn't see any from the from Beyond. So, yep, it looks like they're just going to handle that after they deal with Shadow of Zul. So, tons of obelisks, and I'm always very curious to start looking at how teams have been handling this, because I think Keystone Masters, the tournament before MDI, the community tournament, I feel like that really built everybody's confidence up a lot when they started seeing, okay, yeah, the keys are lower, but we're looking at how teams are able to deal with it, and they're like, oh, well, we could probably do that. Oh, well, okay, we'll deal with 2. Okay, we'll deal with 3. Now they're like, well, we really want to win this tournament, so now we're going to be dealing with 4 in some of these dungeons.
It really is incredible to see the 4 Awaken pull with the last boss, because even in the first weekend, in the first EU weekend, we've seen most teams only deal with 2, maybe 3, but we haven't seen 4 obelisks that much at all the first weekend. But the second weekend, EU and Asia region definitely got a lot more confidence to try these 4 Awaken pulls. And it just saves so much time, because these Awaken mobs, I mean, you can use them to do some sort of skips, but in the MDI, time is everything that matters. So doing a skip without the Awaken mobs, just using your Shadow Meld or a Shroud, it's just so much faster compared to going inside, having to single target down an Awakened mob with such high HP. And there's also just no efficiency you can use with these Awakened mobs. There's no trash you can pull on top of them, nothing like that to maybe get more efficiency out of it. And that's why most of these teams try to pull all of them with the last boss.
That's right, and here we go, Deplete from Beyond, all 4 obelisks, all pieces of Exodia put together, fighting up against King Dazar as we've got tons of pressure onto the tank right off the bat. Even with all those hunters taunting off from our tank buster here, there's still a ton of work for him to do right now, and they are getting the first of the obelisk mobs taken down. I'd love to see that preliminary spread by those hunters as well. Makes their life very easy when any of the leaps are coming out from King Dazar. Also, I'd like to pick from Igloo taking Invoke Chi-Ji from the talent perspective, because they're moving so much and they're going through the dungeon ridiculously quickly. It helps to be able to have a bit more spread healing from your little Chi-Ji, your little red bird, your red crane, to help out along the way. The tank healing is always nice from Statue, but I think with how spread out everybody is, it definitely benefits the group quite heavily. And right now we're seeing it on display. Almost all of the Awakened mobs are done. That's the last one. Blood of the Corruptor, final one to go down. Boss is at 65%. Even while they're trying to laser down all of these obelisk mobs, they still are just dealing a ton of damage to the boss, and absolutely putting on a show right now. Deplete from Beyond looking to finish up this game, take an early lead in the series. Sala goes up Everybody is absolutely trying to destroy this last raptor, and Self-Reliance trying to take down the final member of the Council of Tribes.
I just want to emphasize one more time just how difficult these 4 Awakened bosses are with this last boss. I mean, it looks simple when a team like Deplete from Beyond pulls this off, but the amount of coordination they have to put into these pulls is immense. You need to interrupt all of the cast from Void Weaver, you need to make sure you dispel all of the fears properly with the revival, then you have the Dwarf Rachel to dispel it afterwards, you need to turtle it, immune it in the right moment to be able that it doesn't apply to you, you need to taunt off the Spirit Breaker from the tank, otherwise he goes down if it leaves the damage increase debuff on them. Just so many small little things need to come together on this pull to make it happen. So I'm always very I think it's always awesome to see these teams pulling it off so perfectly. So well done by Deplete from Beyond. As King Dazar goes at 22% now. Self-Reliance unfortunately struggled a little bit in this dungeon, and it seems not the first time that they're struggling here. It really just seems like King's Rest might not be their favorite dungeon to play.
Certainly it has not been an easy one for Self-Reliance. Deplete from Beyond, 8% left on the boss. They went all in, grabbing everything together with King Dazar, and it has paid off massively for them. Deplete from Beyond's growth this tournament has been incredible to see, and they're going to take game number 1 in King's Rest.
Incredible to see indeed, Jack. That is going to be a game number 1 win, as you said, and they're only 1 victory away from sending Self-Reliance out of this tournament. This is a lower bracket round, and that was an incredible run from Deplete from Beyond. They had all 4 obelisks at the end. They blasted through a Machimba, which is a boss that we've seen teams really struggle on today, Dratnos, and this team is really on fire right now.
Yeah, the King's Rest is looking good from them. This is the kind of run that, you know, it may not be as fast as the top couple seeds best times, but it's certainly competitive with them. You know, 21 minutes and 9 seconds. That would be about on pace with Perplexed's earlier King's Rest run against Deplete from Beyond. So, yeah, this is a good run coming out from a squad that needed to have good runs to win this tournament for sure, and to win this series even.
Definitely, and Nagura, you were highlighting it at the end, but we can talk about it more, how difficult it is to pull off those, like saving those 4 obelisks for the last boss. What kind of coordination does that take in preparation to be able to do that cleanly?
I think it's just so important with these Awaken affix to be able to do as many obelisks as you can with the last boss, and I think that should always be the team's first priority when they practice a dungeon, right? They probably go in and see, okay, so how many obelisks can we do with the last boss realistically? Because that will be the biggest time save in any of those dungeons. And if you can pull off 4 with the last boss, as we've seen by Deplete from Beyond here, that's just immense. And we see some other teams, they're just not daring to do it. Maybe they don't have enough practice time to try it out or to pull it off properly, or they think it's just too much of a risk. That's why we saw Self-Reliance dealing with some of the Awaken mobs here. While Deplete from Beyond, they just went all in, and I do think it gets a little bit easier with the triple hunter setup, just because you have so many pets to taunt off the Spirit Breaker from the Tank Master, and they also have a lot of defensive abilities to get rid of the fear, for example, and they're able to be a dwarf because they don't need the Shadow Meld because they have Feign Death. So I think the hunters make it a little bit easier, but it's still incredibly difficult to pull it off.
Yep, a difficult strategy to pull off indeed, but it's certainly paid off for Deplete from Beyond during that last game. Dratnos, it sounds like we had a couple of highlights during that last match. What was the one that you wanted to talk about today?
Yes, let's start with what went most wrong for Self-Reliance at the start of the dungeon, when they had, you know, a little bit of an unfortunate death turn into a full wipe, turn into they couldn't even have anybody successfully, you know, feign death and survive. Looked like a hunter pet was still there with some aggro, and led to that getting attacked, and that ended up causing the entire team to die rather than just a few of them. So that really set Self-Reliance back at the start of the dungeon, and it allowed Deplete from Beyond to capitalize with those later pulls. We saw that Berserker coming in on Kula the Butcher. I think they may have just missed a trap on it. I'm not sure if that was actually part of the plan to fight that thing with the boss. It ended up working out okay, but it looked a little bit sketchy to have that active at the same time there. And then, yeah, 4 obelisks with the last boss. Always an impressive thing to see executed well, even with those 3 hunters. It's the kind of thing you need to be able to do to hang with the Method EUs and the Perplexeds of this tournament, and Deplete from Beyond have shown that they are capable of executing those kind of strategies.
Yeah, they certainly have, and it looks like we're going to be moving on to Shrine of the Storm, or sorry, Underrot next, because Toldagor and Workshop have been banned from this map pool. So Shrine of the Storm, we have Fortified, Necrotic, and Volcanic. Jack, what are some of the things we're going to be looking to see these teams succeed at for this next game?
Oh, I think we're looking at how the last boss has really been handled. Too many times that has been one of the deciding factors in this dungeon is how they're able to handle and how they're able to mitigate mistakes on the last boss. We've seen some huge snaps going into Lord Stormsong's hot tub as well. Those have been great to see too. So I think a lot of it's going to be looking at how they're able to just avoid a lot of downtime. With this dungeon, there's a lot of mobs that you need to skip around, that you need to dodge around, and they need to be able to put it all together for that last boss and frankly not die. Simple.
Yeah, it is pretty simple, but you know, I mean, we did see Paint for Femme sort of fall apart on Shrine of the Storm earlier today. It's a map that, you know, it can either go very, very wrong or, you know, fleetingly well, but it's definitely a difficult map, something that can fall apart super easily for these guys. Is Self-Reliance going to be able to turn this around, Nagor, or what is this going to be difficult for them?
Funnily enough, they played this exact game yesterday already. They played From Beyond against Self-Reliance, and they played Shrine, and Self-Reliance won. So yesterday they won this map. If they can repeat the same thing, then that would be a 1-1 and they can come back in the series. But earlier today, Deplete from Beyond had an incredible run in Shrine against the boys, and they had a 16:55 time with 0 deaths. So that's definitely faster than any of the runs we've seen from Self-Reliance so far.
Yeah, we're going to need to see something new out of Self-Reliance, or Deplete from Beyond with their bigger pulls. If something goes wrong there, that's going to be the opportunity that Self-Reliance will then need to capitalize on.
That is kind of a good point. I mean, do you think it would have been a smarter move for Shrine of the Storm to be banned from this map pool, Jack?
I think there's really the question of like what dungeons are they going to be most confident with, and which dungeons do they think that their opponents have and have not practiced. I mean, one of the big things, if you're looking at like Junkyard, nobody's really been having Junkyard go through throughout this tournament as an example, but you're also seeing dungeons like Toldagor getting banned quite frequently as well. So I think when you get into these matchups, especially like Nagura said, since Self-Reliance had won that previous matchup against them, there's got to be that level of confidence that, hey, we can do this again. We just need to be able to get it together.
Absolutely. So the dungeon is about to start here. We'll have to see if Self-Reliance can tie this up, or is Deplete from Beyond going to send this home with a 2-0?
Alright, so we see the hunters actually turned into DKs and a demon hunter now. We see both teams are doing this snapping pull onto this lantern. We saw Paint for Femme earlier have a huge wipe coming in, so hopefully Deplete from Beyond and Self-Reliance can pull this huge pull off.
That's right. I mean, early in the dungeon, there's a lot of these extremely strenuous pulls as Snap Spot gets used to great advantage between these guys. We have a little bit of observer lag, but we do see Rentari going down on the side of Deplete from Beyond. Not that many mobs are left remaining, so they just need to be able to kite it out, finish it up, and hey, I mean, it's kind of a fast way of doing it. I mean, they have to go to the obelisk anyway, all right? He just lost his food and flask, or his food and his augment rune and all that stuff, you know?
I mean, do you really need that stuff? That's just for tryhards, you know, right?
Exactly. They're chill.
So, both teams are dealing with this Void Weaver here. We've seen some teams not do the Void Weaver and play with the last boss, but it's incredibly difficult because of how the last boss works with the intermission phase needing the interrupts. So you would have to like nuke down the Void Weaver really quickly before the intermission phase, and that's just incredibly risky. That's why we've seen most teams deal with the Void Weaver beforehand.
Thank you. Excuse me. Oh, I love muting my mic. There we go. Anyway, as you mentioned, the last bit of the Void Weaver Malthier is getting chipped down as both Deplete from Beyond and Self-Reliance are getting into Aquasur's room as we speak. And again, having to deal with Necrotic is ridiculously frustrating for a lot of these tanks. We've seen a number of times where people are just getting locked in Necrotic and running for their lives if they don't have that Dwarven ratio at their disposal. And we've also seen a number of times is they're kind of taking a moment to get everything in together until Aquasur spawns, and then just absolutely blasting it. Deplete from Beyond in particular. had incredible damage on Aquasur first time we saw them today.
Yeah, but this time around, Self-Reliance actually spawning Aquasur a little bit earlier. They already popped their Bloodlust on top of all of this trash. And look at the amount of single targeted damage they have. They're already in their intermission phase here soon, as they're still dealing with the trash passively. Definitely want to make sure you interrupt all of those important casts. And one thing to note is as well that Deplete from Beyond, they were playing a Hunter in the time trials, and they now switched it to Demon Hunter for the tournament play. And one reason might just be having this offensive dispel from the Demon Hunter, which is really nice for those Templars who, in case a cast goes through, having that damage reduction on him is just very bad. So having the Demon Hunter, in case a cast goes through, definitely helps a lot.
Yeah, and when you're in these larger polls, everything is ridiculously hectic as well. And not being in range to be able to get a kick because you're running around some of the Tempests, or you're just trying to avoid one of the charges from Aquasur. It's just a nice way of having a bit of backup as well, you know. And I'm sure there's a couple other small factors, but it's usually what it is. It's just a combination of small factors that come into play to say, all right, we're going to bring this class over another.
Yeah, I agree. And it also gives you, of course, the magic damage increase for the Unholy DKs who do mainly do magic damage, so that will help as well. Looks like Igloo is first pulled the droplets on the right side from the upper platform, then went to the left and pulled the initiates. So well done by Igloo to pulling all of the extra little trash they need to get a couple bit of enemy forces here to get the amount they need at the end. Aquasur is about to go down for Deplete from Beyond, but Self-Reliance already done. They're moving on. They got their 29% trash. So at this point, Self-Reliance a couple of seconds ahead, but still very close.
Yep, and as you saw, all the small initiates that were surrounding the Windspeaker Heldis, if you move to one of the braziers near the side of the room there, if you're looking at Windspeaker Heldis, you can actually stand inside the brazier, hit the bottom left initiate as you're looking at Windspeaker Heldis. They'll snap to you without pulling the Windspeaker, and then you can just grab those and bring them into Aquasur and just have some more damage to go out. So similar pulls coming out on the side of Self-Reliance and Deplete from Beyond, taking advantage of Runecarver Soren's debuff field, so that way they're going to be able to avoid taking a lot of damage for one, and I believe it also dispels the Necrotic. If it's used by the boss, it dispels Necrotic, but I don't think that this one does.
I think this one does not, no. I think it's only the boss
What
one,
a ripoff. It's a discount circle.
I agree. Dr. J going down for a Deplete from Beyond, unfortunately. But Self-Reliance, they pulled that one off really cleanly. They pulled not only the trash from the whole inside area, but they also pulled this trash pack in front of the bridge, all on top of Soren, as you mentioned. And what a clean way of dealing with this. Deplete from Beyond is still having some trash left. They didn't pull everything all at once like Self-Reliance did, but they first just pulled the inside area, and then later on pulled the outside trash group on top. So their way a little bit slower, and also a little bit worse of an execution from them. Self-Reliance already on the other side of the bridge, doing one of those demon. I think a Demon Hunter skipped it, because they're not all Night Elves, because Harudra needs to be a dwarf for that dwarf racial. So it's a little bit harder to do those kind of skips. Otherwise, you would just run through and everyone shadow melts, but you really need the dwarf racial here because of Necrotic.
Right, and seen Self-Reliance stacking up all of the enemies as we speak right here, and I guess they're just trying to get a very even stack as they're grabbing Brother Ironhall, Galecaller, Faye to get all of the damage they possibly can onto them and very quickly try to get them burned down right now as Self-Reliance continuing to start expanding that lead. Watching for Igloo to get a good transcend here. Love to see it. He does get hit by the Guardian Elemental, but we will be able to see his Shadow Meld coming out. Nice to see a little skip coming out by the Mistweavers. We don't really see them using it that often.
True. And one thing I want to note about Self-Reliance strategy, the reason why they can do this so incredibly fast is because Harudra does not need his dwarf racial for this pull they did beforehand, which is incredible. We saw this Soren pull where they pulled everything on top of each other. Harudra somehow manages to survive that pull without having to use his dwarf racial, and this is why they can immediately afterwards do this pull here into Brother Ironheart and Galecaller Faye, and he can use the dwarf racial to get rid of all of the initiate necrotic stacks. So incredible play by Self-Reliance. Deplete from Beyond now also engaged the boss, but they're just slightly behind here, and they also have no battle rest available, so they want to be very careful to not have any sort of deaths here.
That's right, and Rentari's taking a bit of damage. He needs to be able to drop his Necrotic. As you see, he jumps into the defensive zone right there, but they're also having a lot of mobs staying in that field, and they're kind of lingering around for quite a long period of time, so at this point it's just so much chaos because they're always kicking any of Galecaller Faye's debuffs and any of her AoE, spawning more tornadoes while she's buffed, so trying to get that reset, trying to get everything back in together, but that was incredibly nasty to deal with when you have all the tornadoes going all over the place, and you still have to watch out for some of the aggro while the mobs are running away in fear.
Yeah, and now Reliance finishing off the boss. They'll be moving on, dealing with that Awaken mob here. They are using the Obelisk to go inside, deal with the Awaken mob, and also probably use the portal to get to the other side, because again, Herudra not being a Night Elf, meaning they can't do any of those Shadow Melt skips. I mean, they can theoretically do the skip and then rest Herudra back up, but it's just a huge time loss, not only because of the death that costs you 5 seconds, but you also need to cast that Mass Rest, which is just additional time, which you don't want to spend. That's why they deal with this Awaken up here, drag it all the way over to the bridge side, and then deal with the trash there.
Yep, we've seen, again, second of the Obelisks going up on the side of Self-Reliance. Deplete from Jan is just trying to work on taking down Brother Ironhall and Galecaller Faye. They just seem to be going a little bit slower. I mean, this isn't really, I guess, the confidence that we were seeing out of Deplete from Beyond previously here. And they still got a lot of tricks up their sleeve, but this is where you start seeing a bit of the lead start edging more and more in favor of Self-Reliance, where they kind of grow their advantage here.
Yeah, I mean, we still know that Deplete from Beyond has this trick up their sleeves where they will snap a bunch of mobs onto the next boss. So that's just where they can make up the time that they're missing. So right now they're, I would say, almost a minute behind, not only because of dungeon speed, but also the 10 seconds death timer. Maybe they can make it up with that snapping pull that we saw them do last time around. But in the end, there's still so many things that can happen in this shrine, because we still have the last boss, where so many things can go wrong, and we saw Self-Reliance wipe earlier on the last boss because Herudra went down because of the amount of damage that is incoming on that fight. So still, so many things that can happen, as Deplete from Beyond is pulling that Awaken mob up the bridge as well.
I mean, they didn't even need to worry about going into Stormsong's bathtub on that one. They just absolutely destroyed the entirety of the bridge right there. They're going to look to get a very quick triggers to any of the RP to start proccing the boss fight here as they're dealing with any of these eels, and they don't really have a ton of stuns to be able to start shutting them down, so they're kind of just looking at, and a DK going down right there as the eels, the little tentacles, excuse me, just absolutely overwhelm them.
Yeah, sea turtles. I told him that these can be very dangerous on a fortified environment. The thing with these dwellers is they have this lash cast. Now, as you mentioned, they don't have that many AoE stuns, and then you can get a little bit unlucky, and a lot of them focus you at the same time, and then it can definitely cause some issues, and people just get nuked down, basically. And on a fortified environment, they do quite a bit of damage, so undergoing down, unfortunately, meaning it's only just a 5 seconds advantage now.
Yeah, just look at like the difference between the two lash packs. First pack, they didn't really have that many AoE stuns. I think they only had the warriors, and it went down because he got targeted too many times. The second time, they had their DH's, what is it, Fury? Man, I'm missing the name on the AoE stun that they have. Anyway,
Chaos Nova.
Chaos Nova, thank you. Oh, why was I thinking it was Fury something? Anyway, they had Chaos Nova at their disposal. I think they also had like Sweep coming back as well. So it was just like super ridiculously easy when they had it, you know. And it also goes to show like the difference between having Way of the Crane available or not. Rentari going down on the side of Deplete from Beyond. They do get him up very quickly, but that snap, the instant burst of damage that they had going out onto everybody. They're trying to be able to stabilize this pull. It looks like he's reestablishing threat, but there's a lot of damage from those Void Bolt casts going all over the place.
It looks like the boss reset as well, because I'm pretty sure they had the boss engaged, and maybe because of Rentari going down, maybe he was the only one in combat with it, and looked like the boss reset at least. But now Lord Stormsong is being re-engaged by them. The trash is pretty low, so they should be able to finish it off. But there's also some that still have high HP. Looks like some of them maybe didn't snap properly, or just some issues being caused by Rentari going down. Because if the snap target goes down, they might jump away, maybe evade and then heal to full. So definitely some issues here because of the death. But on the other side, Self-Reliance, no issues at all as they finish off Lord Stormsong. They are on their way to get to the last boss area, and here is where it will become very difficult for them to pull this off because of the Awakened mobs and Necrotic and
going
the eels.
down now.
Sorry.
Then
You go.
Thanks. Wait. Huh. Unless. Dr. J's going down, by the way, on the side of Deplete from Beyond, while Stormsong is sitting at 70% as we speak. And again, this is just further and further going to show how Self-Reliance has been pulling ahead, but like you were just saying, before I rudely interrupted, last boss is just everything. Last boss is just everything possible.
Yeah, so both of the teams do have those 2 Awaken mobs with the last boss, which doesn't sound like a lot, because we've seen other bosses being played with 4 Awaken mobs, but this specific boss just makes it so much more difficult because of the fact that the intermission phase splits the tank and the healer from the DPS, and even though the Awaken mobs are in both areas, so both areas can attack the Awaken mobs, but you can't heal the damage dealers because Furo is split from them. So it's a very weird interaction, and it makes it very difficult for those teams to handle. Now they did engage the boss. Seems like they're saving their Bloodlust for after the intermission phase, so let's see if they can pull this off.
Yep, you're seeing Volzith's HP is just trucking. It's just gone right now. We're seeing a lot of teams getting into that mid-60s% as we're going to see Self-Reliance get to around the same point. Of course, they're going to save Bloodlust so that they can just force the one phase when they grab that middle pack on top of it. Now they've got the Tank Buster and Blood of the Corruptor, and they have to worry about one of the Dwellers downstairs. So right now, Harudra's just fighting for his very life as you see on the side of the DPS with Ashvale, Nickel, and Anda. They're just letting the first cast go through. Then they're going to be getting all the rest of the kicks. And at that point, it's just very, very quick focus to bring down one of the casters. So that way the DPS can come back and start helping Harudra and company with the last of the Blood of the Corruptor, last of the Obelisk mobs on top of it.
Yeah, and look how fast that blood is as well. It looks like it should be slow because it's a huge blob, but it's incredibly fast. Look how Harudra is trying to get away with it, but it keeps catching him and refreshing the necrotic stacks. So very unfortunate as he has to deal with the necrotic, plus also having to deal with the spirit breaker here because they're not running a hunter setup, so you don't have those Hunter Pets to taunt off that ability from the Tank Buster. Just needs to deal with it himself. He could theoretically outrange it, but he needs his movement abilities to reset his necrotic stacks. Now the blood finally going down, only the Tank Buster left to deal with, but that's still a difficult task to handle for Harudra.
Yeah, but I like how they're focusing on killing the Dweller downstairs first before they end up dealing with the last of the Obelisk mob. So they do have a couple people coming out right on the other side of the circle there, so very good to see that they're having everybody getting out of the silence field beforehand. Does look like they're going to be keeping up this Obelisk mob a little bit longer as they're just going to kill it first, then they'll be able to grab up everything together and bring it in for that final burn that they'll have on boss. So right now, Self-Reliance in the driver's seat as Deplete from Beyond is about to go down for their first intermission, and they're getting the boss just a little bit lower than their opponents on the side of Self-Reliance, but there's going to need to be some big mistake here for Self-Reliance to lose.
Yeah, I mean, 59% on ball Sith here for Deplete from Beyond before they got the intermission phase, but it's not going to matter because if both of the teams need to face this, there's not going to be a time difference at all. And on top of that, it's also 15 seconds in death in favor of Self-Reliance. Now, we see them they dealt with the Awaken mobs now. They still have to deal with this middle pack though. So they have to deal with those two denizens, and with the middle one, looks like they actually engage the boss. Oh, okay, so they're just pulling everything on top. Very interesting. Right. This is incredibly difficult to handle because you need to make sure you interrupt the denizens as well. And you also have the tank denizen that just gets kited by Harudra.
At this point, what denizens?
Okay,
I like
they're
how
already
Furo
gone.
ended up dispelled himself there. That was great to see. He actually took off his promises of power buff as they started up the pull, so that way he could go into melee with Way of the Crane, start slamming some extra damage, and now he keeps his buff even though the boss has died, they're still in combat, so he's able to assist them with killing the last of the eels right there. Self-Reliance, bless you, is going to be taking game number 2 and tying up the series.
Yeah, Deplete from Beyond had a pretty good first clean run, but they just weren't able to keep their momentum going into game 2. And Self-Reliance has managed to tie it up, and they only need one more win to continue on into the bracket. And Dratnos, this is a pretty big pull at the end there. Break down those final moments of their victory for us.
Yeah, Self-Reliance there ended up having a run, 17-minute run. That's the best we've seen out of them, and they were looking like a completely different team than we'd seen in some of the matches earlier, in that King's Rest even, where things are looking, smooth, well-oiled, and better than all their previous Shrine of the Storm runs as well. So they have really showed up to play today.
Yeah, they certainly have, and there's only one more game, only one more win these guys need, and they can put Deplete from Beyond out of this tournament. This is an elimination round. Jack, can they keep this momentum going into the game 3, do you think?
I think they're going to have to at this point. I mean, we talked about how, there's differences in time trials, there's difference in quality of runs that we saw from, both teams, really, since Shrine has been run a ridiculous amount of times so far, and at this point, we can't even really focus too hard on one time trial or another, because both of these teams have had extra time to practice. They know that their tournament life is on the line, and they came here to play.
Yeah, and it sounds also like, Dratnos, you have a replay that you wanted to highlight for us. What have you got for us?
Yeah, so Deplete from Beyond, they have the faster theoretical Shrine time that we've seen so far out of these two teams, but they were having these kind of random early deaths throughout the whole dungeon. They culminated with a really brutal death on Lord Stormsong that I think cost them the most time out of any of these things happening. And those small advantages really accumulated in favor of Self-Reliance, who, by contrast, they only had one death throughout this whole dungeon. Wasn't a huge deal as well. They didn't exhaust their battle res resources in the same way that Deplete from Beyond did. And that really was ended up being what cost Deplete from Beyond there. And that's something that we've seen out of this team before, where sometimes just runs can get pretty messy pretty quickly for them, and they can fall far behind. By contrast, in the third match, we could really be looking to see, the best of both these teams. When they're both firing with all cylinders, I think that this could be a really exciting final match of the series.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were talking about this before this series. These teams are kind of neck and neck, and given that we are tied right now, we're going to be moving on to Underrot. Sanguine is one of those affixes along with Tyrannical and Skittish, and Sanguine is an affix that a lot of teams have banned. They're kind of trying to avoid here. Nagura, how are these teams going to be looking to get the edge here with Sanguine and that difficult affix?
Yeah, Sanguine can cause so many issues in Underrot specifically, because in Underrot you want to do those huge pulls. We've seen the pulls by Method U, for example, where they would pull almost all of the Cragmaw room on top of the boss. But then unfortunately, they healed the boss all the way to full HP, and it was basically for nothing. And that is definitely those kind of issues that you can have with Sanguine, because some mobs, they just really don't like moving. Some bosses specifically, they just cast an ability, can't be moved. You can't displace them with Typhoon or anything like that, of course. And then you can just look at the boss, heal themselves to full HP, and that's gonna be it. So hopefully both those teams are gonna handle that Sanguine well, but definitely lots of problems that it can cause for sure.
Yeah, and there's a couple different strategies that you could really do with these obelisks here coming from Underrot. Jack, how do you think that we're going to see these teams tackle that?
A lot of times we've seen, I believe, 3 obelisks being pulled more often than not. A lot of times we'll see, for example, I believe it's the Breaker of Heroes, a tank buster in the Cragmaw's room that's been pulled a number of times by some of the different teams. So I think that we've seen, I want to say Method U has pulled 4, but most teams I've seen have been doing 3, so a lot of it really comes down to looking at Cragmaw's room and how big they can go without having the boss get healed by Annie the Sanguine.
Yeah, definitely interested to see how they handle those. And, I think we touched on it a little bit, too. In KSM, we weren't seeing anybody handle those 4 obelisks at the same time. And now a lot of teams are going for it. The competition has really been raised quite a bit now that some of these teams are maybe more practiced at the Awakened mechanic, Dratnos.
Yeah, the 4 obelisk with boss. I was competing in that Keystone Masters tournament, and even at Keystone level 16, it was scary to do. And, we tried it in a couple dungeons, and a couple of them we were like, oh, this is really, really tough. But these teams have had a couple months now to, be practicing and be preparing, and they're much better than me. So they were able to figure out how to do these really tough boss fights with those 4 awakened enemies at once, which, every single time we see that, there's a huge chance that something goes wrong because every one of those mobs does something important on most boss fights.
Does the last boss in Underrot, I mean, you go down, you kind of have that tight space there to work with. If you have 4 obelisks, does the boss in Underrot, Nagura, make it a little bit more difficult to handle the 4 obelisks, or is it quite a bit the same as maybe some of the other maps that we're seeing these teams try and pull it off with?
I think this boss specifically makes it a lot more difficult to deal with 4 obelisks just because of the huge area of denial that he had from his frontal cast. So positioning is very important for all the players. And position also matters for the awakened mobs. So if you need to run out of a Dark Fury cast and then you bait the frontal in a bad way, it will cover half of the map, and then the spores will come from different kinds of directions and will cause lots of issues. So this is why we've seen most teams deal with at least one of the obelisks, because you don't want to have fear on top of Dark Fury cast, on top of Void Weaver that needs to be interrupted, and then you also need to make sure the tank buster does not go in the tank. So it's just too much of coordination, I think, so far for the teams. Maybe one of the teams will pull it off at some point, but yeah, I'm doubting it.
Well, we'll have to see how this next one plays out. Reminder, guys, the loser of this map is of this next game is knocked out of the tournament. The winner faces Perplexed in the lower finals, 1-1, Deplete from Beyond versus Self-Reliance.
All right, let's get our game 3 on as we're seeing Deplete from Beyond and Self-Reliance starting it off with very similar pulls in the middle of the room. We're going to just see those Mistweaver Monks spike up as well as the Unholy Decay damage just go through the roof as they're going to be trying to neutralize this as quick as they can. Harudra's dropping incredibly low, though. They really got to watch it and continue moving on through that Sanguine kite. Hasn't been too much healing from these mobs, if any, so very well played by both of these teams as the matrons are just going down on both sides and they're wrapping things up.
Yeah, what an incredible pull by Deplete from Beyond as they pulled both of the bridge patrols on top of this middle pack, so they're up to 21% because of this extra trash that they pulled on top. We saw Clicks actually getting hit by the frontal cleave by the matron, but did manage to out-heal it because of the way of the crane that Igloo popped, doing 150k HPS. Everyone dropping incredibly low by Self-Reliance. There's going
Furrow
down. Looks like one of the Shadow Melt skips didn't work out properly. Now, I'm not really sure why Furrow did release, because I don't think there's a way for him to come back.
I think you kind of just burn a battle res there and you go.
Yeah,
right? I don't think
no
that
way
you can really
back.
spin your tires and just wait the entire time.
Invis
Maybe
pot,
you just
I guess,
invis
yeah.
pot, yeah. But that's a lot of damage lost. I mean, it hurts super bad as well because you want to have a battle res just in case as you go into Kragmaw's room because there's always a lot of threat from it. I mean, we'll see if it's going to pay off for them, but starting the boss just a bit later and having your opponents getting a 20-30% lead on the boss, and it adds up quickly.
Yeah, I agree. It's just unfortunate that this Shadow Melt skip didn't work out for them, costing them quite a bit of time. Deplete from Beyond, on the other hand, they're already very low on Elder Liaxa here, 30%. It is a Tyrannical environment, so these bosses definitely have a lot of HP. Doesn't look like it because of the huge amount of damage those teams are doing. And you can see here really the difference between the Hunter damage and the rest of the damage dealers. And this is why you see Hunters in Bolstering environments and in single target focused dungeons like King's Stress and Workshop, because of this huge amount of single target focused damage they can put out.
Absolutely, and I'm always kind of interested to look at how quickly groups start adapting to the meta. It was almost like everybody had the same exact idea, and there's like an honor system of like, okay, if it's Bolstering, we play 3 Hunters.
Yeah.
And if it's any other dungeon, we play 1 Hunter almost every single time, right?
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, there's a lot of trash mobs. We all play double DK. Let's go. They had their secret pact, and Deplete from Beyond grabbing every corner of this room right now. Love the angle from our observers as all of the mobs are going and just compiling into one big burst. Misty Igloo has got a ton of the Bloodstormers tanking onto him right now. 200k HPS going up for the healer. We're going to see those Unholy DKs explode in damage in just a sec. But Way of the Crane's going to be fading very soon. as Kragmaw should be exploding and getting hit by tons of there it is! There's the Unholy DK damage. We got a little bit of observer lag at the moment, but these guys do not, as they have executed that pull to perfection. I think
And
that's every
what a
little
pull it
mob.
was.
Yeah. Oh
so
my
they're up
goodness.
to 62% trash, and they've also
Okay, they
beat
missed
Kragmaw
one.
on top of it.
Unbelievable.
So,
Look at this.
huge pull coming in by Deplete from Beyond here. And they managed to Sanguine perfectly, which is so good to see, because this is what we've seen Method EU do as well. But unfortunately, they healed up Kragmaw all the way to full. So, well done by Deplete from Beyond to deal with the Sanguine properly here. And yeah, just what a pull. Self-Reliance, on the other hand, taking a little bit of a different approach. They did pull a lot of trash in the Kragmaw's area, but chose to not pull Kragmaw on top. Now they're dealing with the Wake 'em Up here, the Tank Buster, and they will have to do the Kragmaw pull afterwards.
Yep, and they're just going to be waiting, Self-Reliance just be waiting for a lot of their cooldowns to come back, because it's just so tedious and slow to deal with the Tank Buster by itself as they're going through it. So, Deplete from Beyond getting a great advantage right now with such a strong execution, and they really have such limited amounts of time as they put those pulls together. We're seeing Self-Reliance doing a smaller pull. They're getting the second section of the room, but they're also grabbing some of those skeletons on top of it. So we'll be looking to see how they deal with the big pull, as Kragmaw has been activated right now, and tons of damage once again going out onto the group. Almost 300k HPS by the Mistweaver Monk right now. Mikko goes down. They need that battle res. It's a good thing that they didn't use it. As well, right? That's one of the things. It makes sense, right? This is such a deadly pull that goes forward. Thankfully, that charge didn't take them back into more Sanguine, and they're around the same kind of HP on boss that we saw at a Deplete from Beyond when they pulled it off. They're around that 70-80% mark when all the mobs died.
Yeah, so well done by them to pull this initial trash pull off with Kragmaw on top as well. Not getting any Sanguine heals on the boss at least. Very important. Now they're out of battle rests though, so they definitely want to make sure they take care, they don't have any more deaths, specifically from those things from Beyond. We saw Ashwell last time around had some issue here on this boss with 2 things from Beyond taking him down. So hopefully this time around this won't happen, as the Deplete from Beyond already really low on the boss, 4%.
Oh, that's a ton of ticks right now for Deplete from Beyond. They're just trying to finish off the boss before they got overwhelmed. So very well played there by the team. And looks like they're just going to be saddling up and running through and trying to grab everything in together as they look towards Sporecaller Xantia for their next pull.
Yeah, we'd probably see a Shadow Melt skip come through here. Actually, it doesn't seem like it. They just... Seems like Rentari is just gathering up everything to pull it on top of Xantia. Yeah, they just pulled the whole room. They just really like big pulls with their double DK comp. You know what we haven't seen yet? Triple DKs.
I've heard stories of the triple DK. Yeah, I mean, it's a little overkill. I mean, who needs triple, okay? Just take 3, 2, 1... Unholy DK, right? And they'll take care of everything for it, okay? It's just all gone. Now,
let me show you a magic trick.
I know, a third one, they're just gonna be 400k or something like it. They're gonna look like a hunter, unbelievable, or worse, they look like a rogue, right? Kiri going down, but they do have a res for him. They gotta let the Unholy DKs have their fun,
Yeah, still cost them quite a bit of damage though, because after getting that huge AoE out, you get those faster might stacks, which increase your strength on that single target damage. So getting a death in there, definitely a little bit of a time loss because of that single target damage. It will be lost by Kuri, but they're still quite a bit ahead compared to Self-Reliance, who just now managed to finish off Kragmaw. Now they're probably going to gather up to do a very similar pull to what we see from Deplete from Beyond, but still quite a bit of time they have to catch up here. Both teams only 2 deaths and 1 death respectively, but still just a little bit of a difference here in strategy. Deplete from Beyond just doing everything slightly faster.
That's right, and as we speak, Deplete from Beyond's at 44% left on Sporecaller Xantia, as Self-Reliance is setting up their Xantia pull as well, grabbing all the Guardians in together. And I kind of like what we saw from Deplete from Beyond, where they really waited to pull those Defilers, and they ended up kind of just almost wandering into them, really. They barely had to move to get the Defilers in very quickly, but it seems like they've almost already destroyed all of those trash mobs before they really encountered Zansha as well. So, hey, if they're able to have more single target, they're able to have more damage, then great, because this is what they need to get back into it, as they're almost in a dead heat. 7-8% difference in terms of trash going up between the two teams. I think that was just the difference between one of the skeleton packs, something along those lines.
And this extra patrol they pulled, the matron pack they pulled
right.
earlier in the first room. Either way, Self-Reliance did deal with an obelisk, right? While Deplete from Beyond did not. So probably we see a quadra obelisk pull with the last boss for Deplete from Beyond side, unless they deal with a different obelisk in this area. But we only have the Void Weaver here on the right side. I very highly doubt they deal with that one, because Void Weaver, not too difficult of a mob to deal with the last boss, because the boss itself does not need any interrupts. So probably gonna see 4 obelisk pull here for the play from Beyond.
I think so, because they have the option of going with the caster, or they could go with the fear, but both of them you have to kill one of the noodles right next to it, and they're really inefficient to do if you're not pulling anything else on top of it. You saw Clix run into a bit of trouble there, so he does get the feigned death and drop combat. It's likely that we're going to see okay, they do have some of the skeleton mobs in there as well. All the nameplates are getting all stacked up right there, so they should be able to get their 100%. And even though they will be overcount, they need to hit 100% before the gate opens. What is that gate made out of? Just guano or flesh?
It looks like a huge spider web, but
that's
I
Tettles
don't see
later.
the spider.
I think Tettles would know.
Tettles would probably know. He's the lore expert of the caster team, of course. But yeah, we see Self-Reliance. They're still working on Sancha. They do finish it off now. But with the amount of trash they need, they probably can't do it in one pull. We see Deplete from Beyond. They pulled everything on top of these last 2 mobs. Finish it off in one pull. But yeah, I'm not sure if Self-Reliance can pull that off with their 21% that they need before the gate opens. All eyes on Deplete from Beyond now, though, as they have to pull off this last boss with 4 awakened mobs at the same time.
That's right, here comes the spawn as they all are running in together. 4 obelisks. Deplete from is all that really stand in the way from a Deplete from Beyond's victory and them moving to the lower finals right here, as we start seeing, value having that hunter as well, getting that off taunt to help support the tank. We see the group just doubling back as well, and I like this positioning a lot to make sure those vile explosions are moving away from the group, and then they kind of have to just do these U-turns. They run out of it, do a quick U-turn, push the boss towards where they were just coming from. And again, the damage control, nobody's playing too risky onto this one, and they're doing such a great job of positioning themselves and making sure they can immune off any of the debuffs, any of the fears that they have to deal with as well. So they've done good to be close enough to the middle of the room that they could drop a lot of their puddles and have more space to work with, because that Blood of the Corruptor adds so many void zones to the floor, and Self-Reliance are getting the last of their trash taken care of, but they're not quite fast enough for Deplete from Beyond.
Ooh, they actually had another fear cast come out here. The last fear was not able to be dispelled by Igloo. Rentari did get rid of it, but Igloo itself got feared, had no dispel left, no revival. They did manage to recover though. Looks like they didn't get the clean zone off, so the debuff is stacking up, and another fear coming out. Unfortunately, we do have the turtle coming out by Clicks and the AMS by the DK, so lots of immunities they can use to get rid of that. But sooner or later they need to finish up that awakened mob so they don't have to deal with any more of those fears, as it can cause quite a bit of issues. And there we go, the last zone coming out to clear the debuffs off from the group. So Igloo does have a little bit of a breathing room, as he's almost out of mana, having to deal with all of the incoming damage here from all of the awakened mobs and the boss.
Yep, and that's always the scariest moment, is once the damage really starts falling off, you still have to deal with 3 obelisk mobs at once, and you just don't have any damage to work with right there. So big kudos to the tank and the healer, really, for keeping their composure and making sure they can stabilize the group, because they'd already burned their revival, so they had no mass dispel, because they used that on the very first fear that went out, so they could have more damage to destroy some of the early obelisks. And right now they're playing clean, and it's just a 19 Tyrannical Unbound Abomination by itself, as Self-Reliance pulling 2 obelisks in together. I think it was 3 to start, excuse me.
3, yeah.
at this point, they're just hoping for something to go wrong for the Deplete from Beyond side, but Deplete from Beyond about to hit that last energy checkpoint and about to be able to take down the boss, and with it, take the Self-Reliance down and out of the game.
Yeah, what a series between Deplete from Beyond and Self-Reliance here. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I thought Deplete from Beyond are the clear favorites here in this series, but
Agreed.
Self-Reliance definitely put up a really good show. Even this last Underrot game has been really close. I mean, it was only a matter difference of the 4 Obelisk versus the 3, and Deplete from Beyond winning against Self-Reliance 2-1.
Yep, and that is going to be sending Self-Reliance out of the tournament, unfortunately. But like you were saying, Nagura, they definitely should be proud of themselves. They had a really good run, and I definitely would like to see them play in the next EU Asia Cup. But Deplete from Beyond will be moving forward in the bracket. They're going to be playing Perplexed in the lower finals, excuse me. And, you know, there was only one